I didn't hear the music stop so much as feel the air change, a hush that lifted the hairs on my arms before my mind caught up. Crystal skittered across marble in a starburst, the champagne flute falling from my hand as if it belonged to someone else. Every face in my daughter's living room turned toward the sound, but all I could see was the man smiling by the fireplace, shaking hands with judges and partners and friends who thought charm meant safety. 7 years fell away. Grief surged up my throat, and I realized the ghost I'd outrun had learned how to wear better clothes. They call me Maggie, and I thought 65 years on this earth had taught me to recognize a predator. I was wrong. My daughter, Sarah, moved through the crowd in a white sheath dress that made her look like the beginning of a new chapter, not the middle of a con. "Mom, are you okay?" she whispered, squeezing my arm as if grounding me would slow the clock. I told her I was fine, that the broken glass was just clumsiness, not panic, not history clawing its way through the present. Then he turned, that practiced smile easing onto his face, and said, "Mrs. Hartwell, I've heard so much about you." He called himself Michael Sterling. I kept my own smile smooth while my bones remembered another name, Michael Reynolds. The first lie he ever told me was that healing can be hurried if you have the right companion. In 2018, 6 months after Robert died, I believed that lie the way a drowning woman believes the first hand reaching down from the boat. I was 58, numb with the kind of silence that follows hospital monitors and paperwork and casseroles you never asked for. He sat beside me at a coffee shop near the Grief Center, ordered tea, and listened like he'd been waiting his whole life to hear my story. For 10 months, he made me feel visible. Then $75,000 evaporated from the account Robert's life had left behind, and the companion on the boat was gone. I shook his hand in Sarah's living room anyway, because that is what mothers do when their child is brilliant with love. Investment consulting. He told me when I asked what he did. I help people make smart decisions with their money. The irony tasted metallic. "And how did you two meet?" I asked, pretending curiosity while my pulse ticked out a warning. "At the gym," Sarah said, laughing. He was persistent. He had always been persistent. He could circle a fortress so patiently you'd begin to think he was the guard. When the last guest left and the glitter of approval settled over everything, Sarah walked me to my car, breathless with plans. "Isn't he wonderful? We're thinking October 15th, less than a month, less than a season to remember everything I'd learned and everything I'd ignored." I kissed her forehead and told her I loved her, then went home to a kitchen that still smelled like Robert's favorite coffee and stared at a blue-lit screen until my eyes burned. 3 sleepless nights later, at 2 a.m., I was deep inside the internet's underbelly, crawling through the seams of Michael Sterling's life. There was nothing before January of 2020, not a trace of youth, not a breadcrumb of college, no textured past for a man who knew the wine lists of 3 continents, clean profiles, clean licenses, clean arrivals, too clean. I hired a private investigator on Friday because sometimes you need someone who doesn't flinch when the floor opens. Patricia Newman looked like the kind of woman who ironed decisions until the truth lay flat. We met in a diner whose coffee came with a free refill and a promise to mind our business. She spread documents between the salt shaker and the lipstick stain on my cup. "Michael Sterling exists only from January of 2020 forward," she said. "Before that, he's fog." But I found a Michael Reynolds who vanished in Chicago in 2018 mid-investigation for romance fraud. The word fraud landed like a gavel, but it was the city, my city, that broke something in me. "Victims?" I asked. Patricia's mouth tightened. "Mostly widows and divorcees, $50,000 to $100,000 at a time." I nodded once. 75. I said, "He took 75 from me." She didn't pity me. She turned a page and kept going. Phoenix in 2020, Nashville in 2022, Denver in 2023. Same smile, different name, identical choreography, quick courtship, sudden engagement, a vanishing act perfectly timed. As Patricia talked, I watched Sarah's future assemble itself out of old crimes. My daughter, who would inherit her father's trust next year, who still believed the world was teachable, had invited a lesson into her home that could unmake everything. What do I do? I asked the diner's cracked tabletop. Because questions look less desperate when you ask them to object. Patricia slid a card across the laminate. We find proof, she said, and then we build a story your daughter can't ignore. I picked up the card. I picked up my courage, and I promised myself that next time a glass shattered, it would be the sound of a mask hitting the floor. Sunday dinner used to mean roasted chicken and the familiar creak of my daughter's dining chairs, the easy comfort of stories told twice. That night, it felt like theater with a script I didn't recognize. Michael insisted on cooking, moving through Sarah's kitchen like a man who'd practiced ownership sleeves rolled, sauce whispering on low heat, the measured patience of someone building a story that would taste like trust. It's simple, he said, plating with a flourish. The secret is time let flavors blend until they belong to each other. I smiled and lifted my fork as if I hadn't heard the double meaning. And Boston is still home, I asked lightly, watching the flicker that passed through his eyes before he nodded. Boston, then Los Angeles, a stint in Phoenix, and Nashville for a while, he said, casual as weather. Patricia's timeline rang in my head like a fire bell. Chicago fits, he added, raising his glass. Some places feel like destiny. Sarah squeezed his fingers, beaming. The room was warm and golden and suddenly suffocating. I asked about family as if I were merely making conversation, and he offered a soft, practiced sadness. Parents gone, no siblings, the loneliness of a man sculpted by loss. 7 years ago, his parents had been alive but estranged. Now they were useful ghosts. After the dishes were cleared, Sarah stepped into the living room to take a call, leaving me with the man I used to confuse for salvation. He lounged back, a glass of red glinting in his hand, and said, "Sarah told me she was close to her father. You must have carried more than your share when he passed." I kept my voice steady. "We managed." He nodded sympathetically, then let the line out a little farther. She also mentioned the trust her father left, the one maturing next year. It's a comfort knowing her future is protected. We looked at each other across the polished table and understood we were no longer speaking about food or family or fate. "Yes," I said. "It comforts me too." On Monday morning, the phone didn't ring so much as accuse. Sarah stood in my doorway an hour later, coat still on, eyes bright with a fury I'd never felt from her. "Michael told me about dinner," she said, arms folded like a barricade. "Why were you interrogating him?" The word hurt more than I expected. I told her I'd ask questions any mother would ask. She said I'd sounded suspicious. I said everything was moving too fast. She said Michael predicted I would say that. It was a masterclass in isolation performed in my own hallway. "We need space," she said abruptly. "Until after the wedding. I think it's better if you don't come." The sentence didn't land. It detonated. I reached for her hand and found air. She left with a final, trembling kindness. "I hoped you'd be happy for me." The door clicked. The house went quiet in that awful, immediate way grief does, like someone turned the world down. Anger came later, clean and clarifying. I dialed Patricia and didn't bother with hello. He made his first mistake. I said, "He wants me gone for a reason." We met that afternoon, and she brought new pages that smelled faintly of printer heat and inevitability. "He doesn't reuse only names," she said, tapping a list. "Marcus Sterling, Mitchell Stone, Matthew Reynolds. He reuses patterns. 1 week before the wedding, the victims consolidate accounts for expenses. Transfer funds. Then he disappears. I looked at the calendar. October 15th was carved in bold hope on my daughter's wall, which means October 8th is his clock. Patricia said, "We have days." I pressed my palms flat on the table. "Evidence won't save her," I said. "A story will." Patricia studied me. "What are you thinking?" I swallowed the taste of humiliation and made room for strategy. "I'm going to apologize," I said. "I'll invite him to lunch, make him feel forgiven, let him relax enough to show me who he is." Patricia's mouth became a thin, worried line. "If you do that, he'll try to make you doubt your own memory." I nodded. "Good," I said. "Then we'll learn what he does when he thinks I'm weak." I called Sarah at 7:30 p.m. and told her what she needed to hear, that I was sorry, that I'd misjudged, that I'd invited Michael to lunch tomorrow to make things right. Relief softened her voice. Hope returned like sunrise over a stormed-out city. After I hung up, I sat alone at my kitchen table with Robert's maple tree black in the window and rehearsed the shape my forgiveness would take. Tomorrow I would meet the man who'd taken $75,000 and almost all my faith. Tomorrow I would offer him a peace he did not deserve and wait for the moment he mistook it for surrender. I arrived early the next afternoon, choosing a corner table where I could see the door and keep the light on his face. The restaurant hummed with low conversation, the clink of silver on porcelain, and that faint perfume of moneyed calm that men like Michael used as camouflage. He walked in 5 minutes late, wearing confidence like a tailored suit, every move measured to suggest ease. "Margaret," he said warmly, kissing my cheek as if we'd known each other for years instead of lifetimes apart. "Thank you for this." I matched his tone, the apology in my voice practiced until it almost sounded real. "I owe you one," I said. "I realize now I misjudged you. Sarah's lucky to have someone who makes her so happy." He smiled, eyes narrowing slightly, as though testing how deep the sincerity ran. For the first few minutes, we talked about ordinary things, how busy wedding planning had become, the unpredictability of Chicago's weather, a new restaurant he wanted to try. Then I asked the question I'd prepared all night, pretending to stir my tea as though it were casual curiosity. "Have you ever been in love before?" "Michael." His eyes flicked up, and I saw the briefest pause, like a skipped heartbeat. "Once," he said softly, "years ago. She was older, kind, brilliant, going through a hard time. I thought I could help her." I held his gaze, my pulse loud in my ears. "And what happened?" He shrugged, almost wistful. "I wasn't ready. Timing is everything." My throat tightened. He was telling the story of us as if it were a parable his failure turned romantic myth. "She sounds wonderful," I said. "What was her name?" His mouth curved slightly. "Margaret. Margaret Thompson. She went by Maggie." My breath left me in a rush. He knew. He'd known all along. He leaned back. The picture of composure. Small world. Isn't it? Here I am, about to marry another Margaret's daughter. I like to think the universe gives us second chances. "Do you ever think about her?" I asked, barely above a whisper. "All the time," he said. "She deserved better than what I gave her." His expression softened into something that could almost pass for guilt. "Tell her that, if you ever see her again." He stood to leave, resting a gentle hand on my shoulder. "Sarah's lucky to have you." When he walked away, I sat motionless, unsure if I'd just met a reformed sinner or a man rehearsing repentance to perfection. But the moment replayed in my head, frame by frame, the carefully dropped name, the subtle control of the conversation, the way he'd guided it back to my own emotion. It wasn't guilt, it was theater. The man hadn't changed, he'd evolved. When I told Patricia everything, she listened without interruption. "He's building a new persona," she said finally. "The remorseful man who learned from his mistakes. It makes his next move cleaner." She reached into her bag and handed me a folder thicker than before. "You need to see this." Inside were new records photos, reports, timelines. Every woman he's targeted in the last 5 years is related to a previous victim. Sisters, daughters, nieces. My stomach twisted. "So Sarah isn't coincidence?" "No," Patricia said quietly. "He's hunting legacies. It's not about money anymore. It's about control." The truth tasted metallic, like blood or fear. He wasn't stealing fortunes. He was erasing lineages. I pressed my palms to the folder, trying to still the shaking. "Then we make him stop." Patricia nodded. "You'll need help. There's someone you should meet." That night, she introduced me to Special Agent David Chen, brother of one of the women who'd vanished. He brought the weight of the FBI and the calm of a man who'd spent years staring into the dark. "He's not just a con artist," David said. "He's a predator who escalates. We have evidence of financial fraud, but nothing that sticks. We need him to reveal intent, something we can record." We sat around Patricia's dining table, the air heavy with strategy and quiet dread. "He thinks he's smarter than everyone," David said. "So we use that. You make him believe you're no longer a threat, and he'll start talking freely." Patricia looked at me, worry furrowed deep. "That's dangerous. So was loving him," I said. "And I survived that." We outlined the plan until midnight. I'd play the defeated mother, the reconciled fool. Patricia would stage a fake investigator's call to make him feel safe again. And when he came to visit me, thinking the game was over, I'd record every word. By the time I drove home, the streets were empty and slick with rain. I parked under the maple Robert had planted when Sarah was born and watched the water slide down the windshield in slow, shimmering veins. 7 years ago, I'd lost $75,000. Tonight, I understood what he'd really taken: my sense of safety, my faith in judgment, my ability to trust my own eyes. But as the rain blurred the city lights into a wash of gold and gray, something inside me hardened into calm resolve. He wanted to finish what he started. I was going to make sure he finished it behind bars. Jennifer's apartment smelled faintly of jasmine and printer ink, the kind of neutral comfort that hides tension in its corners. I sat wrapped in a robe, pretending fragility while Patricia's team wired the tiny recorder under my sleeve. "He'll bring the charm first," Patricia warned softly, "then the concern. Keep him talking. Don't let him steer." I nodded, heart hammering as the plan took shape. Sarah thought I'd fallen. Jennifer had called her that morning, saying I'd tripped in my driveway and was resting. Michael would believe the same lie, convinced that the woman who'd once challenged him was now a trembling relic of herself, the perfect victim, again. He arrived at 4 p.m., punctual, polished, carrying a container of homemade soup. "Family takes care of family," he said gently, setting it on the counter like an offering. I forced a smile. "That's kind of you, Michael." "I promise I'm fine." He sat across from me, hands folded loosely, concern painted in perfect strokes across his face. "Sarah's been worried. She said you're trying to take it easy. Maybe it's a blessing. Life reminds us to slow down." "Yes," I said, "and to appreciate second chances." His eyes brightened. "Exactly. That's why I wanted to see you. There's something I've been meaning to say." He leaned forward, elbows on his knees, voice dropping to a confessional tone that could melt glass. "I've made mistakes. Margaret hurt people who didn't deserve it. There was a woman once older, kind. I was a fool. Took advantage when she was grieving." I kept my breathing steady as he dissected my own past like a lesson he'd learned. I told myself she'd be fine. He continued. "But she never really recovered. I ruined her faith. So when I met Sarah, I thought maybe I could make it right. Give her the love and safety her mother lost. I stared at him, every muscle locked against the scream rising in my chest. He believed his lie so deeply that it sounded almost holy. That's very noble. I managed. His smile shifted subtle, controlled. The first glimpse of the man beneath. I like to think so. Sarah trusts me completely, and I'll protect her from anything that might hurt her. He paused just long enough. Even you. The room chilled. He sipped his soup as though he hadn't just drawn a line through my existence. She worries about your health, you know. Another fall. A stroke, anything can happen at our age. But she's lucky. If something happened, I'd be there to help her through it. Guide her decisions. I realized then what he was really planning. He didn't want to disappear this time. He wanted permanent legal control, emotional domination, a widow's daughter rebuilt into a possession. When he left, promising to visit again tomorrow, I sank into the couch, trembling. Patricia and David emerged from the adjoining room where they'd monitored every word through a hidden receiver. "It's not enough," David said, removing his earpiece. "He's careful everything phrased as concern. We can't charge him on implication." I gripped the armrest. "He threatened me." "Not directly," Patricia said. "It would never hold." David opened a folder and slid it toward me. "We have something else. Every woman he scammed in the last 5 years has vanished or died within 18 months. Accidents, suicides, car crashes, statistically impossible. The air went thin. So he's killing them. We can't prove it yet," David said, "but his pattern fits. Marriage or engagement, consolidate funds, honeymoon, then tragedy." My stomach twisted. "So we wait for him to kill Sarah? No," David said. "We accelerate him, push his ego until he reveals his hand. You confront him again, but this time wired and with us outside." Patricia's eyes widened. "That's too dangerous." "It's the only way," David said quietly. "He won't harm her before the wedding, but if he feels cornered, he'll slip." I looked at them both, remembering the way he'd said family takes care of family. Then we make him think I'm done being quiet. I spent that night staring at the ceiling, counting every breath to stay calm. Somewhere. Sarah was probably curled against him, believing she'd found her forever. By this time next night, I'd know whether I still had a daughter or whether she'd be another name in Patricia's file. The next evening came with a metallic sky and the weight of final chances. David's team parked 2 blocks from Michael's building. They fitted me with a wire small enough to forget, though forgetting wasn't an option. If he gets violent, David began. He won't. I interrupted. Violence is for amateurs. My hands shook anyway as I climbed the stairs. The hallway smelled of cologne and power. When he opened the door, his smile was lazy, affectionate. "Margaret, you look better. Come in." I stepped inside, my pulse matching the steady click of the recorder. "I know who you really are," I said. The mask slipped in a blink. Gone was the gentle fiancé. What stood before me was the architect of ruin, calculating how fast he could rewrite the scene. "You're mistaken," he said smoothly. "Am I Michael Reynolds? Chicago. 2018. Phoenix. Nashville. Denver." Silence expanded between us like a held breath. He stood perfectly still, the faintest smile curling at the corner of his mouth. "That's quite an imagination," he said finally, voice smooth as silk over steel. "Or maybe," I answered quietly, "I've just learned to remember. For a heartbeat." We stared at each other, predator and prey, switching masks in real time. Then he moved to the kitchen, opening a drawer with deliberate slowness. I couldn't see what was inside, but the gesture was meant to remind me who once held the power. You know, Margaret, he said, voice low. It's not healthy to live in the past. People change. You're right, I said. I did. My voice sounded steadier than I felt. I learned that monsters don't stop until someone stops them. He turned back toward me, eyes sharp. What is it you think you know? I listed the names one by one. Catherine Chen, Jennifer Walsh, Rebecca Morrison, each syllable landing like a nail. You can pretend you don't recognize them, I said, but the FBI does, and they have your fingerprints all over 6 disappearances. For a moment, his stillness was absolute. Then he smiled, that same devastating, rehearsed smile that had fooled every woman who'd wanted to believe in redemption. The FBI, he repeated, amused. You think they'll believe a bitter old woman trying to sabotage her daughter's happiness? They already do, I said. Catherine's brother works for them. You should have picked a different family tree to poison. Something cold flickered behind his eyes. You've always underestimated me. No, I said. I just finally stopped underestimating myself. He laughed softly. Even if you tell Sarah, it won't matter. She's already signed the paperwork, joint accounts, financial planning, trust access. By Monday morning, I'll have what I need, and you'll be nothing but background noise. My stomach dropped. You're lying. Am I? He said, enjoying the fear. She trusts me completely. You taught her that how to give everything to the man she loves. The sound of boots pounding the hallway cut through his arrogance like thunder. The door burst open and a dozen voices shouted commands. He didn't flinch, only raised his hands as if he'd expected the applause. Michael Reynolds. Agent David Chen's voice rang out. You're under arrest for fraud, identity theft, and conspiracy to commit murder. The cuffs clicked shut. Michael turned his head toward me, eyes bright with triumph. You were too late, Maggie. By the time she knows, the money's already mine. Before I could answer, another voice came from the doorway, steady, furious. Heartbreak made flesh. Actually, Sarah said, stepping inside, you were the one who was too late. For a moment, he looked stunned. Sarah walked forward, chin high, 2 agents flanking her. I never signed a thing, she said coldly. Those were decoy documents the FBI gave me. Every word you spoke was recorded, every move traced. His confidence cracked, splintering into disbelief. Yes, she said, voice trembling with rage. Me, the daughter of the woman you tried to destroy. She looked at me then, eyes bright with tears that were equal parts fury and love. You really thought I wouldn't notice. Mom. That I didn't know something was off, I just needed proof. The room seemed to tilt under the weight of it. Truth at last, years late but perfectly timed. As the agents led him out, Michael twisted once, meeting my gaze with something that wasn't charm anymore. This isn't over, he hissed. I stood tall. It is for you. The door slammed, echoing down the hallway like the final note of a song that had haunted me too long. Sarah turned into my arms, shaking, for the first time in months. I let her cry, holding her as if every breath could glue back the pieces of the life he'd tried to break. I'm so sorry, she whispered. You tried to warn me. You don't owe me an apology, I said softly. You just owe yourself forgiveness. 2 years later, when the verdict came down life in prison for 6 counts of murder, multiple charges of fraud and identity theft, I didn't feel triumphant, just tired. His real name was Marcus Webb. 15 years of lives undone, families fractured, futures stolen, but his last one failed. Because this time, the women refused to play their parts quietly. Sarah rebuilt, stronger, wiser, her trust fund untouched, her faith in herself intact. She found love again eventually, but she never signed anything she didn't read twice. Sometimes she jokes that she inherited my stubbornness. I tell her she inherited my survival. As for me, I learned something simple, something expensive. Love without verification is just vulnerability wearing perfume. You can't always save the people you love from falling, but you can teach them to stand when the ground gives way. That's what family is. Not perfect trust, but the courage to face truth together. And if my story taught you anything, let it be this: never mistake charm for character, and never let fear silence you, because silence is where predators live. If this story moved you, take a moment to like, share, and subscribe. Your voice might be the one that helps someone else see the danger before it's too late. Tell me in the comments where you're watching from and what lesson you took away. I'll be reading everyone.